What's up, Beasto Nation? It's an exciting time. Fantasy football season is back. Nothing's better than that. Well, we actually still have some ways to go, but we're expecting fantasy football to be back. So, before we get started off, I just want to show off this nice little gift this client sent me, Jared Cook autographed jersey. I know you all know that's sick right there. All appreciate that. Jared Cook, huge part of the draft strategy last year. In fact, the draft strategy was centered around getting Jared Cook in round 6, if you all remember. And Jared Cook was the highest scoring tight end in the fantasy playoffs, which included two touchdown games, including 2 touchdowns in the fantasy football championship in week 16. So awesome gift there. Much appreciated, much love. You know who you are. All right, let's move on to the NFC West. This is a bit of a free preview to show you what the draft guide is. Not really, to be honest, because it goes so much more in depth. But you're going to hear me break down 4 teams. And to be honest, there's a lot more to break down. But I'm just going to give you the raw shell of the 4 teams. So, St. Louis Rams are no longer, it's the LA Rams, and I should be saying that since I live in LA. They just never, I don't feel like they ever got the LA spirit. I know they made it to the Super Bowl, but it felt like fake love, and now it's one of those things where if the Rams continue to go downhill, which is definitely possible, Chargers need to get Cam Newton in order to get that hype going now for them, but I don't know. I don't think anyone in LA really cares about how the Rams do at the end of the day. They lost Todd Gurley. They lost Brandon Cooks on offense. So that's right away, something where you'd have to think that they would get a replacement to take care of both those guys. Before we get into that, let's get into the offensive line. The offensive line is garbage this year. Todd Gurley really had nothing to run behind. So to get rid of Gurley and to leave him with Darrell Henderson, who showed that he's really just not that good of a running back, way too small, can't break a tackle, with no offensive line, no blocking, there's nowhere for him to go. On top of that, they got Malcolm Brown, and Malcolm Brown to me is my favorite running back of the bunch. He's shown time after time that he can be the leader of that team. When Gurley had to miss games, he was reliable, he killed the clock back in their Super Bowl year, played a lot of fourth quarters, and he absolutely dominated those fourth quarters. I could see him winning that job. The other running back they got is Cam Akers, and Akers looks all right, but he doesn't look like, he's the future running back of the Rams. He looks like a guy that can hold that spot over until the Rams get, some more talent at that position, whether that's via the draft next year or free agency. All in all, the running game's not going to be good. So it's going to be, the Rams are going to rely on Jared Goff to throw the ball. They lost Cooks, so you have to automatically assume that both Woods and Kupp are going to have great seasons just because there's going to be a lot more volume. But don't think so fast on that one. Let's not forget, even though we just talked about Jared Cook, Tyler Higbee was the number 2 tight end in the fantasy playoffs last season during those 3 games. So Higbee's there. Gerald Everett was better than Higbee before Everett went down. If you remember that epic, I believe it was 2 years ago, even that Rams-Chiefs game on Monday Night Football, where it's like 56-54. Everett was the guy. Was that last year or was that 2 years ago? I'm going to say it's 2 years ago just because Rams weren't that good last year. So, Josh Reynolds, he's going to be the guy who's replacing Brandon Cooks more or less, but what is he, a 3 or 4 catch guy? So when Goff drops back to pass this year, you're probably going to be a lot of shotgun more than anything since that offensive line is going to be so bad. So he's going to look for Woods and Kupp quickly, and if those guys are sealed off, then you'll probably look at the tight end, whatever's in there in the middle of the field, in case that double pressure rolls there. So then you got Josh Reynolds one-on-one, maybe running streaks, but Brandon Cooks does so much for an offense that is very underrated. He keeps a safety 20 yards back. Now, no defense has to do that against the Rams. You can keep everyone basically in the box. Safety's not like 12 yards deep. it's going to be a tough year for the Rams offense. And to me, it's an offense that we're going to completely avoid during the draft. Sure, in daily fantasy, Woods could have a good week, Kupp could have a good week. But overall, for where those guys probably go, I don't look at the rankings until my rankings are all set. And then it's time to compare and create the perfect draft strategy. So I'm assuming those guys are going to be top 25, both of them. And to me, it's not worth drafting either of them. So let's talk about the Rams defense, okay? They got rid of Wade Phillips, which was, what Sean McVay is to an offense, with his offensive genius mind. Wade Phillips is the same way with his defensive mind, and the guy's a legend. They replaced him with Staley, I believe his last name, Brandon Staley, defensive coordinator, and how he got here, right? He first had Khalil Mack with the Bears. So he already had a good Khalil Mack as a linebacker coach. And then he had Von Miller with the Broncos. So he basically has made his way from a linebacker coach on the heels of having two of the greatest pass rushing linebackers to being a defensive coordinator of this Rams team that really just is not that good in my opinion. You got Erin Donald, of course, who is the best of the best. So how can I say that? And they got Jalen Ramsey, who is potentially one of the best of the best. It feels like corners slowly start to drift down as their careers continue to go on. And they got Leonard Floyd, his boy from Chicago, who's going to be a great pass rusher. But outside of those three guys, you're looking at a lot of trouble. Shaun Robinson, actually he's not bad either from the Lions. He can kind of clog the middle. But then they got Kenny Young, Michael Kaiser, at their linebackers. Those guys are not that great. They're not going to be leading the NFL in tackles. So it's going to have to come down to the safety help from Nick Scott and Taylor Rapp. And these guys are not good. This is not the Rams secondary of 2 years ago that had them in the Super Bowl, with Peters and Aqib Talib. Then you got Troy Hill. Okay, and Troy Hill is a cornerback that, if you remember from the playoffs a couple years ago against the Saints, he had that horrible defensive pass interference. Just not a good secondary at all. I mean, just avoid throwing the ball to Jalen Ramsey. Just go away from Erin Donald and avoid Leonard Floyd with a double team, and you basically have the Rams completely beat. So the Rams, it's going to be a really bad year if you're a Rams fan, unfortunately. All right, so next team we're going to talk about is the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, of course, with Kingsbury. That's just what it is. Kingsbury is almost the Sean McVay of Arizona in a way. Actually, pretty much identically. So the big move, of course, is Deandre Hopkins. We'll get to that first. Let's talk about the offensive line. Pugh's nice. DJ Humphries is nice. Funny, actually, never mind. J.R. Sweezy, he's not bad either. So they got enough talent on that offensive line to be manageable. The problem with the Cardinals' offensive line has been injuries over the past 2 seasons. It appears this year they're healthy going into it. So now here's why Arizona's offense is going to be really nice. DeAndre Hopkins. The Cardinals run so many plays. I don't believe there's any team that runs more plays than the Cardinals, always with their hurry-up offense. They throw the ball quick a lot, and Kyler Murray's got a gun on those quick outside releases. When I watched him last preseason, the very first thing I said about his game was I just love the way how he hits those out patterns. He really has a lot of arm strength and zip behind those throws. So DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a ton of catches, PPR league. Honestly, would not be surprised if he set an NFL record for receptions. It's going to be that crazy. Now, is he going to have a ton of yards? Probably. I mean, but let's before we get there, Christian Kirk, he's going to have a solid season as well. I shouldn't say that because he's not on the fantasy radar at all because they also got Larry Fitzgerald. So it's Kirk, Fitzgerald. Those guys are really going to be playing second fiddle to Hopkins. Hopkins will leave 1 touchdown on the table for either of those guys each game. Fitzgerald's more or less just a guy that moves the chains. Kirk is a guy who can get deep. If you're playing in one of those non-PPR leagues, Kirk's probably got more upside, but Fitzgerald in PPR leagues is a tad bit better. But regardless, you're not really drafting either to rely on them. Dan Arnold was a great tight end addition. Dan Arnold was with the Saints. Honestly, he could have played. He could have played had they not been so deep at tight end year after year. I mean, you got Jared Cook, you got Taysom Hill, who played a lot of tight end, and then who's that other Saints tight end? It's slipping my mind. It's gonna bother me if I don't pull him up right now just to see. They got rid of the guy, of course. There was some other guy, but it wasn't good. But he was enough to get a few receptions here or there. It's bugging me that it's not on top of my head. It'll come back. Anyways, so the running game for Arizona, Kenny and Drake, I'm on one. Drake always looked good in Miami. I've been writing about Drake looking good in Miami for years now. And now looking at Drake in Arizona, there's going to be a lot of upside in that system just because they're going to be scoring a lot of points. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. Now, before we go all gun-ho on drafting Drake and Hopkins, got to look at a lot of other factors. Yes, on paper, they're looking great, and they will have good seasons. There's no doubt about that. But are they going to be the guys we're going to grab in the draft strategy? We'll have to find out. All right, let's go to the defense here. And Vance Joseph is the defensive coordinator of an amazing defense. They got Chandler Jones, who can easily lead the NFL in sacks. Like he was a half a sack last year away from doing it. They got Jordan Hicks and Deandre Campbell. I love both those guys. Hicks, you can read, I wrote a whole article about Arizona's defense, but Hicks has been a great linebacker for the Eagles, part of the Super Bowl roster. Campbell, he basically held the Falcons respectable when Deion Jones and Keanu Neal were out. Both those guys are going to get the job done. Defensive tackle Jordan Phillips is a big boy. He was with Miami. He's with Buffalo. He's going to do a good things there. Peters is another big boy on that line. But then this is where the team is vulnerable and where you can attack this defense. Patrick Peterson, no doubt, best safety or best cornerback in the game. I most fear him when I'm picking opposing receivers. Now they got Budda Baker at free safety. The guy can hit, he can run, he can do it all. They're probably going to have Budda Baker on the opposite side of Patrick Peterson. So you're not going to throw to Peterson. Budda Baker is going to be guarding the tight end slot, that type of area, but mainly watching, the other side of the field because the other corners on this team are not good. Byron Murphy, Kevin Peterson, Alfred, these guys are nothing. And then Jalen Thompson, he hasn't proved a thing yet. So there are weaknesses on this defense. Is it the best defense? Someone else I didn't mention. I don't know how he even slipped. There's a couple guys. One, Devon Kennard, sack master. The guy can easily get 10 sacks this season. Him and Chandler Jones on that pass rush, lethal. But their number one pick, Isiah Simmons. Simmons is going to be, he's basically a mini Lawrence Taylor out of the gate. So they got a great linebacker core, a great pass rush, a good enough defensive line to kind of hold that line of scrimmage so the pass rush can do its thing. It's just everything on that opposite side of the field. Budda Baker is going to have a ton of responsibility. He can do it. He can do some magic. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. Arizona is a nice team this year. All right, let's go to San Francisco. Obviously, they should have been the Super Bowl champions. They blew it. Just barely, they blew it. They gave up a big fourth quarter lead. Nothing else to say there. All right, so obviously it all starts with Jimmy Garoppolo and his offensive line. Offensive line added Trent Williams this year, so they're actually looking really good. They got Trent Williams, Tomlinson, Richburg. The guy's been a legend, Richburg, for so many years. They got Compton. I mean, they are absolutely stacked. Now, we don't know what their running back situation is going to be because it's always been a three-headed monster. But Matt Breida is no longer there, which helps. So now it's Mostert and Tevin Coleman. Okay, so there is some more upside. But before you get too excited, don't forget the 49ers spent so much money on Jerick McKinnon that they almost have to give him a chance to compete for that third running back spot. There is upside in those three players, but the thing is they're all going to eat each other up. Mostert definitely has the lead command, but don't forget Tevin Coleman was the boy for Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. Well, Devontae Freeman was there too, but Kyle Shanahan wanted to make sure he brought Tevin Coleman over. So honestly, on a fantasy perspective, we're avoiding all those running backs. Receivers, Debo, Brandon, Ayuk, Kendrick Bourne. With no Emmanuel Sanders there, Debo Samuel definitely has a leg up in this competition. For who's going to get targets. But don't forget, Dante Pettis is still hanging on back there. They like Jalen Hurd a lot. The rookie, Brandon Ayuk, he's got a lot of upside. He's electric. There's a lot of potential there. But don't forget, this is George Kittle's team at the end of the day. So Kittle and Debo are really the targets here if you're looking at targets at receiver or tight end. But when you compare them to what we've been through so far, obviously DeAndre Hopkins is on another level than Debo. But I'd put Hopkins on another level than Kittle as well. That's no surprise. Looking at Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cook's gone. Looking at Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, when we look at Debo Samuel and George Kittle, the Rams are going to be throwing the ball more. The 49ers are going to be winning. There's also just a lot of receivers that Jimmy throws to. It doesn't seem like he really locks into the same player every single week. Yes, it is usually Debo or Sanders from last year. Debo and Sanders from last year, as well as Kittle from time to time. But at the end of the day, what are we really going to see? We're going to just see a lot of guys getting involved here in this offense. And it's not as sexy as the other option with the Rams receivers. Of course, Kittle being a tight end gives him a nice edge, but who's going to have a better season? I'm going to say Woods and Kupp will have a better season than George Kittle. Don't forget, the 49ers love to run the football. They have no problem running the football more than any team. I believe they even threw the ball in the playoffs last year. Not even one time. All right, so 49ers pass rush. There might not be a better pass rush in the NFC. Nick Bosa, D Ford, Armstead. Just three guys that can get to the QB like nobody's business. Then they got Fred Warner at middle linebacker. He did a great job basically replacing Patrick Willis without anyone realizing Patrick Willis is gone. Richard Sherman, he looked beatable. And he's just another year older. So that secondary is becoming more and more of a weakness. I believe the Chiefs saw that that's how you have to attack the team. And teams are going to take that into 2020 and do the same thing with how they attack the 49ers secondary. Witherspoon, Kwan Williams, Jason Barrett. These guys are not good. Tart, he's all right. He can hit hard. But there's nothing really to be afraid of. And outside of Fred Warner, this linebacker core is really nothing. So with the 49ers, you just got to really max protect that pass rush. And then from there, you try to get the one-on-ones. Even Richard Sherman, they're all beatable. Richard Sherman's beatable. He proved that during the Super Bowl. And he's shown it many times before. He talks the talk, but I don't see him walking the walk this year. All right, so now let's talk about Richard Sherman's old team, the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, it's another Russell Wilson season. Chris Carson, he's expected to be back, but so many major injuries early in his career. And now Rashad Penny's injured. It doesn't look like he's going to be ready to start the season. I'm surprised they haven't just made the move and signed Marshawn Lynch. Just get it done. They drafted this boy DJ Dallas, but he's too small. He's too small to be any factor at all. So it's going to rely on Russell Wilson. And before we get into Wilson, let's look at the offensive line. Shell, Pokich, Hunt, Upati, Dwayne Brown. The left side of that offensive line is nice with Dwayne Brown and Upati, but the rest of the offensive line is very weak. So it's going to come down to Russell Wilson throwing the ball. He added a nice weapon this offseason with Greg Olsen, but let's not kid ourselves. Greg Olsen's over the hill. Just not the best receiving core. Yes, DK Metcalf is a solid big boy receiver, but he's really better suited as a wide receiver too. And you can say, oh, but Tyler Lockett's a wide receiver 1 in the slot. But Lockett's best as a wide receiver 2 as well. They really need someone on that other opposite side, because you got Lockett in the slot, you got Metcalf on one outside. So it's really that other outside receiver that needs to be an impact. Like if they had Antonio Brown, game, set, match, and there are slight rumors of that, and that can change things. But outside of those 3 guys, it's David Moore or Philip Dorsett for that outside spot. I don't see either guy really making that big of an impact. Yeah, they might get a touchdown here or there. But all in all, I could see Russell Wilson really just spreading it out, using his legs. Even maybe 2 tight end sets with Jacob Hollister. They still got Disley, Olsen. They got a lot of weapons. Metcalf, he's going to be too unreliable. I'm sure the sheep are all over him, pushing him as a top 30 receiver, probably even top 20. Tyler Lockett in PPR leagues is nice. He does tend to disappear at times, but boys, he's speedy. He's speedy. He'll have some good games, no doubt, but he'll also have some 3 catches for 37 yards or 4 catches for 27 yards mixed in. Now, the Seahawks defense, they got to figure out how to get Clowney back. Of course, their linebacking core is basically what keeps them so solid. You got Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, and Michael Kendricks, all 3 guys. I mean, Wagner's probably the best middle linebacker in football, and then Wright and Kendricks can definitely play like all-stars. Outside of that, though, Bruce Irvin, he's a nice pass rush. LJ Collier, he's probably a little overrated. And then Shaquille Griffin, Trey Flowers. Yeah, those names sound all right, but they're definitely beatable guys. Quandre Diggs is a nice safety to watch everything. And McDougal's not a bad safety. So the secondary for Seattle is not as bad as expected going into this season. But at the same time, it's beatable. And you're not going to try to run the ball against the Seahawks because that linebacking core is just too strong. They're going to be able to do anything. It's really going to rely on Bruce Irvin getting the pressure. And Bruce Irvin does reunite with his old boy, Ken Norton Jr. So there is upside there. There is upside there. All right, so now let's talk about just the quarterback situation. We basically went through all 4 teams of the NFC West. We didn't dive into the QBs enough. With Jared Goff, I just don't see enough upside. Yeah, they're going to be throwing the ball a lot, so that gives him some respect. But Jared Goff might not be that good of a QB at the end of the day. And with the heavy pass rush, that's how you make Jared Goff a bad QB. So we're not in love with Jared Goff. Next QB is Russell Wilson. There's upside in Russell Wilson's game. There's no doubt about that. He's put up big performances before. They need Antonio Brown for Russell Wilson to be a QB that, I would even consider putting part of the draft strategy. If they get Antonio Brown, for sure. But without Antonio Brown, I'm not in love with it. I'm just not. There's going to be a lot of pass attempts, so that puts Wilson ahead of Goff, just because Seahawks will be winning. There will be pass attempts. The running games, Wilson did not run that well last year. I believe he had, 2 games with the rushing touchdown, or 2+ games with 2+ touchdowns, something like that. His rushing numbers were not impressive. I did a whole article on it. And let's see, last but not, actually we got Kyler Murray. So Kyler Murray has way more upside than Jared Goff, and I'm going to say more upside than Russell Wilson for sure. Better weapons, better Deandre Hopkins, more plays, more upside. He runs the most. Kyler Murray's on top of that list for NFC West QBs. And then you got Jimmy Garoppolo. So if Jared Goff is on the bottom right now, Garoppolo, I'm going to say, is ahead of Jared Goff because the 49ers they have a lot of weapons, but then you have to think about it even closer and you look at that fact that the 49ers are going to run the ball so much this year. But Garoppolo is going to be a lot safer when the matchups look good. Garoppolo's not a bad QB. He's got the weapons. But at the end of the day, these are not even the official rankings. There's still so much more we have to go through with the draft guide. And you'll see everything, how we break it all down for who the players are that we're going to draft. You can sign up. It's all free this year. Send me an email, beast@beastdome.com, and I'll hook you up and you'll be ready to dominate your league, no doubt. Have a good one. Beast.